Hello, my lovelies. I hope you are able to tune in to a little bit of happiness this Monday or whenever you are listening to this. I know I have been feeling very heavy of heart lately and just really trying to do what I can for myself to anchor back into the energy of unconditional love, to deep self care, self trust, rest, relaxation, rejuvenation, right? I could say all of the R words here, just like for this massive list of how we need to take care of ourselves. We need to relax, we need to rejuvenate, we need to recharge, right? Like recalibrate, I think is probably number one. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today is recalibration in this time and space and how we can tune into the power of self-love versus the impact of self-neglect. And I have three card decks today that have messages for us because we need so desperately right now to really, really tune into the power of compassion for ourselves so that we can be more compassionate with others and really, really help each other during a time of great turmoil. So, I just kind of want to start there. Like, what's currently happening in our world and how stressful this time is. And I've been really, really struggling. So I live in the United States, and there are executive orders coming out right now that are impacting many people that I care about, love, work with, and it's extremely, extremely stressful. And it doesn't feel like it's coming from a place of love or freedom or joy. It feels like it's coming from a place of power and control. And I talked about that during my last Shadow Side episode, if you want to go back and check that out. But I'm going to kind of leave that today and just center on what do we do when we are facing great turmoil, and what do we do when everything seems hopeless to us and we don't know how to even take care of ourselves. We have to anchor back into that self-care in order to have the impact that we're here to make. So uh, I have had this ongoing journey over the last really 2 years. It kicked off at the beginning of 2023. I would say right from the beginning of 2023, I knew that I couldn't keep doing my therapy practice the way that I was. It was really, really draining me. I had transitioned out of agency work that was paying me pennies, and I was having to see 40 plus clients a week to make ends meet and just absolutely exhausted. Because if you imagine a regular 40-hour work week, those are grueling, and holding space for so many people's pain at the same time is so emotionally taxing. I can't even begin to describe it. So I was really, really burning out. And I had this spiritual calling to go to Sedona, and I was making good money, with a six-figure practice by the time that I had begun to build my own business. And I was very fortunate to be able to book a trip to go meet up with friends in Sedona in a kind of sharing a Airbnb situation, and we were able to go out and explore. And I had this beautiful experience in what's called the birthing cave in Sedona, and it really told me like it's time for a rebirth and you need to follow the promptings of your soul that you were hearing at the beginning of 2023, which was to leave my whole business as I had built it behind and to kind of start over from scratch and build it the way that my soul needed to for alignment and for health and for joy and all of that. And so come August of 2023, I left my therapy practice behind. It took about a year to get out from underneath insurance companies to be able to open my practice back up if I wanted to. And in that time, I began to really build a soul aligned business. And so all through 2024, I'm building this, brand around being authentically ourselves, stepping into love, uplifting the others. Living Luna's slogan is uplifting the others because we really genuinely believe that we all deserve to live a life of dignity, authenticity, joy, respect, peace, I don't know how sensitive this microphone is for picking up the alarms outside, so I do apologize for that. We live right next to a fire station. But, um, this invitation to love ourselves more was this big push that I had. And now at the beginning of 2025, when we come to the sort of 2-year turning point of this journey, again, there's executive orders going into place that are really deeply hurtful to me and so many people I love. So it's just a heavy time, and I don't have it in me to hate anyone. That's not what I do, but I get curious about why we feel the need to harm one another. And I think it comes back to this self care versus self neglect piece. As a society, we have been taught to sacrifice ourselves in the name of work, productivity culture, hustle, grind, right? In the push to make more money and to be able to keep up with the ever expanding reach of consumerism. And if you went to public school like me, right, you really learned that you needed to get a good grade and you needed to prove your worth and you needed to do all of these things to be seen as a valuable member of society. And that's very deeply reductionist of who we are as entities, beings here living a life, right? We are infinitely creative and have this ultimate capacity for love and expansion. And this is why it's like one of the messages I wish everyone could hear is that when it comes to profit, if our workers, our employees, our contractors, our whomever in whatever role they're doing to create something or do a job, if they were self-loving, self-aligned, self-aware and able to self-actualize doing what they love to do and being paid a decent wage doing it, we would make lots more money. There would be more abundance and more people would benefit from that. But we've been trained into self neglect. And when we're trained into self neglect, we don't take very good care of ourselves. And this has a huge spiraling effect. It really creates this nonstop loop of I can't take care of myself, so I can't get ahead. I can't get ahead, so I can't take care of myself. And this loop just plays on repeat. And it's why I chose to build my business differently and to try and come in from another angle, and from the angle of money needing to be reallocated in order for more people to be able to access more of the services they need. Like, it's really backwards when regular citizens trying to do their job are trying to protect each other versus the systems that are supposedly in place to help and serve and protect us all. But that's where we're at, and that's why mutual aid and such is so important. But the deeper root of all of this, right, is that systems of oppression actually benefit from our self neglect. When we have no energy, when we are depleted, we have less capacity to challenge injustice. We have less capacity to speak up for ourselves. And this really, again, creates this continual loop where I don't have the resources to take care of myself, so I'm burning out. I'm burning out, so I don't have the resources to take care of myself. Like, you could kind of see this loop in a lot of different angles, but ultimately it's I can't afford to take care of myself. And so I'm naturally going to self neglect. And this is going to literally mean I can't have the impact I'm here to make. So, we are being invited. There's a card in one of the decks I draw from, and it says it's the card is our ancient future. It's from the Beyond Lemuria deck. And this card speaks to how we need to bring back ancient wisdom to make it our future. And this really speaks to the 7 generations forward and backward that I see happening. And we're the 7th generation, and shit's compounding right now, basically. But we need to look back to indigenous cultures and their wisdom about how sustainable caregiving is related to caring for the caregiver and the community. That the community rallies together to take care of everyone, and everyone is allowed to take care of themselves, and their identity is honored. Their truth is honored, right? The whole I'm going to talk about it very soon. the idea of trans identities being some new woke thing is so historically inaccurate, again, reductionist, and really shies away from a lot of indigenous cultures and cultures all around the world that have acknowledged many spectrums of what gender shows up as. And this is, again, we need to connect back to that wisdom, because the wisdom, I'm going to use big air quotes here, the wisdom that's being shared right now is sacrifice yourself for the dollar bill. Sacrifice yourself for your country, sacrifice yourself for your family, sacrifice yourself for whatever, your religion. Self-sacrifice is not the way. So even if connecting to your wisdom is connecting to the wisdom of Jesus Christ, he taught that the kingdom of God is within you and that you are here to create that. And that looks like self care and love and awareness and peace and generosity. And then that pours out this energy, this ability to take care of others, right? As Christ consciousness teaches us to do, right? To love our brothers and sisters and siblings and to take care of one another, to love thy neighbor. So if that's your wisdom that you need to lean back into, listen to that. But there are so many pieces of wisdom from our ancient past that can teach us how to really take care of one another. And that's so much of what we're being called into right now. And I want to speak too to that capitalism has really twisted self-care. So self-care, I remember I feel like it was actually around the time that I was getting my degree in mental health. So I have a master's in community mental health and a license in mental health counseling. And during that time, I was being taught the importance of self-care. But around me, when I was looking at what was being shared culturally, media, right? Society, what they viewed self-care as, it was this very performative, consumer-based feeling, um, push to basically go to the spa, get your nails done, uh, get a massage, right? Buy that new fancy thing. Like self-care was mostly based on buying things, buying services, buying objects. And that is not what genuine self care is either. Self care is not performative, it's sustainable, genuine rest. So, what actually allows you to rest? And some of those things may be a massage or getting your nails done, right? It may be some of those things, but it's not what everyone else is doing. It's not a prescription, one size fits all approach. It has to be this deeper thing. And that was why when I first became a therapist, part of my mission was to teach people free versions of self care, like breath work and nature and just in the moment stuff that doesn't cost money to go have an experience, but that we can really anchor into here and now. So there are so many different forms of self care. And I don't want anyone out there to believe it needs to be reduced to things that have to cost extra money, because this is one of the most important things we can be doing in reclaiming our power is finding our moments of genuine rest, genuine joy, relax, recharge, renew, regenerate. Shout out to Regenerate Float Center. Like we really have to find this new definition of self-care for ourselves and allow ourselves to do it. Because again, we have been trained to self-neglect. So the next thing I want to share is just this body wisdom that is here for us. Every little ache and pain is something getting your attention. It is some inner part of you, as Red would call it, the entities within that are pulling the muscles and strings of the muscles and strings, yes, the strings of the muscles and the fascia and the tissues, uh, the cells, right? These little messengers that say, my arm hurts, my shoulder hurts, my hip hurts, I have a headache. These are all inviting us to figure out what's out of alignment and how are we being invited to care for ourselves, right? These are all signals from the body. So when we can shift out of this mindset of like it has to be this way all the time and I'm just going to ignore it because it is what it is, to what is this actually telling me? What is my body's wisdom holding and trying to teach me about my chronic self-neglect? So, yeah, part of my journey uh as a business owner came from my chronic illness because I had worked in careers that literally burnt me out to the point where my body started to hurt 24/7. And it was my body's way of saying, this is too much, we're overwhelmed. And I kept pushing, and I just kept pushing and striving because that was what was told to me to be the right thing to do. That was what I was raised to believe I needed to do, that I had to be on all the time and productive and working and taking care of everyone else but myself. And that led me to get a diagnosis of fibromyalgia. And long story short, because I'm sure I'll tell this in much more detail at another point, but in the span of getting tested to try and see if they could diagnose me with an autoimmune issue or some kind of disease that could be solved with medication, I ended up sort of being tricked into using my services at a certain place that was not covered by my insurance, apparently. And I ended up with thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in sudden, unexpected medical bills for a blood test. This led me to need to get more work and ultimately more burnout and ultimately more sick. So this is like a wake up call, hopefully, right? When some people hear a story like this, that we can't keep doing what we're doing because it leads to more issues. So, our bodies do hold the score of our stress, our self-neglect, our anxieties, and these lead to autoimmune issues. This leads to chronic inflammation, it leads to burnout, and this is not a personal failure. It is literally a response to unsustainable patterns that are being pushed by society and then from ourselves because we've integrated those messages. So we need cycles of rest and retreat. We need cycles of action and doing. We are, I talk so much about the shadow light journey and this infinity symbol, the light, the shadow, the masculine, the feminine. You're right. Oh, gosh, this is so misunderstood, and we're seeing that play out in our society right now. But there's the doing energy and the being spiritual energy. There's the taking action, and there's the rest and nourishment. There's the actualizing our goals, and there's the daydreaming and feeling out what we desire. There is this warmth to us, and there is this coolness to us, this anxiety and this depression, this ebb and flow. There's so many layers of this. But ultimately, we have to honor this cycle because so many of us try to just stay on 24/7, and it's this like crash, rinse, repeat cycle of going all out, completely draining ourselves and then crashing, getting up the next day and doing it again. And that is ultimately what leads to so many of our health problems. I could not tell you how many people I know who now qualify as, having disability status because they worked themselves so hard that their bodies fell apart. Or in my father's case, worked himself so hard, he developed cancer and ultimately died from it. Like, I have seen the inside view of so many people's lives be destroyed simply by the pattern of overworking to the point of self-neglect or overgiving to the point of self-sacrifice. So it's not a simple like thing, and it's something so many of us are doing, and especially women. That is why so many of these chronic conditions are diagnosed more frequently in women, is because women have been socialized and raised to be caregivers and to self-sacrifice. And of course, there are many men and non-binary people who do it as well. This is not limited. It's just overarching general patterns, and femininity and people assigned female at birth are generally socialized to be more giving. So I just want to acknowledge that. But we have to find this body spirit rhythm, this seasons of rest and growth rhythm, because It's killing us not to. And this speaks to intergenerational trauma, how many of us grew up being told that we had to be productive and could not slow down and just needed to give of ourselves everywhere. So, intergenerational trauma is a part of this story too. It makes it very scary for us to slow down and actually look at our needs because we think we have to perform so we won't disappoint our parents, or, we won't get fired and potentially not be able to live if we don't continue to put up with toxic or abusive patterns at work. There's so much issue and problems that we need to face in this world together that majority of us are being impacted by, regardless of what side of the aisle you voted on or didn't vote on. Like, the average person is impacted by not great working conditions, high prices, basic survival needs, right? And we can't fight back against that if we are trapped in the cycle of self-neglect. That's the really cold hard truth. So, I want to talk about reclaiming our power some more. Boundaries are acts of self love that allow us to really show up more fully for ourselves and for others. And boundaries are so misunderstood. They are so misunderstood. So I'm going to just try to frame them as succinctly as I can. Boundaries are things we draw around ourselves. And when someone comes into that boundary uninvited, we have to remove ourselves from that situation. That is ultimately what a boundary is I draw this line around myself and I'm saying no one may come past this line. And if someone comes past this line, I might ask them to step out and respect the boundary. But irregardless, I am responsible for removing myself if I need to maintain my boundary, if I need to make sure my little bubble is protected. Boundaries are not putting things around other people and limiting them. That is not what a boundary is. That is a restriction. That is a command, a demand. That is not what boundaries look like. So, taking someone else's autonomy away from them is not a boundary. Not how that works. If you have a boundary and you're like, I don't want to be around a certain kind of person, you are responsible for upholding that. You are the one that doesn't go to where those people are. It sucks. It can really suck to have to manage our own boundaries by removing ourselves from situations that we might otherwise want to be in. But we are responsible for our safety, our comfort, our joy. And again, that does not come by drawing restrictions around others. So, our boundaries that really relate to our self care versus our self neglect often come around with choosing to stand firm and not doing something for someone else that we truly disagree with. So, if it is too depleting for me, I'll just, a recent example. Um, I had a loved one who was trying to leave a bad situation, and there was some interpersonal conflict, and I could really tell that this loved one was struggling, and I said, "What can I do to support you?" And this loved one said, "Well, you can mediate between me and this other person." And that was the one thing I couldn't do. And I had to draw the boundary, and I said, "I so understand why you want that right now, and I am not willing to do that for this reason. Is there anything else I can do?" And it was uncomfortable. It was so uncomfortable because I was trained, right, to not say no to anything, to say yes to everything, and to give and self-sacrifice and, be there for literally everyone. And this was a loved one, and it was very hard for me to say, that is the thing I can't do. But I had to draw that line around myself, and I said, here's what I would be willing to do. So our boundaries are our expressions of what we are and are not willing to do. And we are ultimately the ones that determine whether we do a thing or not. Unless, getting graphic here for a second, unless you are in literal threat of physical violence in the moment, you have a choice that's very clear. And even under the threat of physical violence, you have a choice, but it's a much different one. But Unless you are under a threat of physical violence, you have a clear-cut choice at every single moment on how you draw your boundaries. And that is something that we need to remember we are empowered in. So we don't have to say yes to everything. We don't have to take every task on at work. We don't have to say yes to every family member's request to spend time with them. We don't have to say yes to people dumping their trauma on us out of the blue. We can say, whoa, nope, that is not for me right now. I do not have the capacity for this. I may be willing to come back and look at this under these conditions, but no, right? A boundary is us saying no to what we need to say no to. And that is a huge part of reclaiming our power is actually using the power of our no. How many of us have neglected the power of our no? I know I did for so much of my life. So it's really uncomfortable to lean into genuine self-care because it often challenges those conditioned patterns of overgiving, too much openness, boundarylessness, conditioning of self-sacrifice, martyrdom, codependency, people pleasing, all of that. And yeah, it's really really hard to step into that, to reclaim like I am a sovereign and sacred human being and I get to make choices for myself. It's been a journey for me, right? Like in building my business, I turned away insurance companies, for example, and had to unpanel with them. And that was because the wages were so low, it was burning me out to work for them. And I was losing integrity in my work. And one of my most important values is doing no harm. And that means I have to be a clear, energetic vessel and a clear emotional vessel to be able to hold space for the clients that I work with as a therapist and as a guide. I have to be able to hold a really clear space. So if I'm burnt out, if I'm completely and utterly drained, I'm exhausted and I hate what I'm doing while I'm trying to hold this very special space that honors the person in front of me, that tells them you don't have to self-sacrifice, you don't have to overwork, you don't have to overdo, and I'm not doing that for myself, that's out of integrity, and that was what I realized back in 2023, and why I had to really renegotiate, and since then, I've had to make some sacrifices elsewhere while I recover. I've had to live a different lifestyle. I've had to, do a lot of more self-work and shadow work to figure out my next steps, but it was by stepping back and doing that self-care that I've been able to be more present and actually do this sort of community work where I've been going live consistently for over a year now and holding moon circles for over a year now and being able to send more newsletters out and just talk to more people. Like all of that is because I stepped back to take care of myself. I was able to write 3 books, right? Like the creation came because of how I chose to step back and start drawing boundaries. And that is really, really hard work. I cannot tell you how many hard conversations I've had with family members saying, no, I can't do that. Or just, again, drawing a boundary with a person who does want me to do a project with them that I really know I can't. I had to turn away helping with a community recently that I really wanted, at my in my heart to help with, but knew that my body and my soul could not because I was already at capacity. So it's this journey to figuring out our capacity, honoring it, and being able to affect our boundaries in the world and stand in our power and say yes and no where we mean it so that we have the resources to do what is ours to do. So let's just talk about some practical tips and integrations here. So, what can you actually do to begin turning from self neglect into more self care? The first thing is your breath. I know this is so simple. And it seems like "Ugh, that's stupid. I shouldn't do that. Or what difference is that going to make?" But I was trained in mindfulness based cognitive therapy first. And then I went on to do a breathwork apprenticeship with a ton of yogic anatomy and nervous system, somatic integration with the breath. The breath is your most effective tool because you are constantly breathing. So, simply bringing consciousness to your breathing begins to be an act of self care. The way that I first started this, because I used to be a completely unconscious and shallow breather, The first time that I started integrating this was every time I would have my hand on a doorknob or go through a doorway, I would try to remember to consciously breathe. And that would literally mean following the inhale all the way in, feeling the expansion, and then consciously slowly exhaling and feeling it go all the way to the bottom. And just doing one of these when I went through a doorway began to make me more present to my life, to my body, to my mind, to my emotional state. And that was a huge shift. And again, I know it seems really small, but this is a huge act of self-care. And as we retrain our breathing, we also gain capacity to work with some of our anxiety and reduce some of our anxiety as well when it comes up. I have PTSD. Well, I had PTSD, diagnosable, but I've been able to bring my responses down enough to where I don't meet the diagnostic criteria anymore. I believe once you have PTSD, like that imprint is there, right? You don't escape it or be cured from it, but you learn how to manage with it and live with it. And that's where I've gotten to is I don't have these long-term panic responses or these horrific flashbacks. I have these tools and strategies such as the breath to be able to say, okay, right here and now, I am safe. And my nervous system can feel that, which leads me into my next little quick tip, which is literally to look around your space. If you're feeling overwhelmed, to just look down, around, up, left, right, behind you, and twist your spine a little bit. I call this the no tiger twist. I don't know what its official name is, but that's my code name for it because this tells your body, like, I'm not running right now. And then one more simple and free tip is to say no. Say no when you mean no. And one of the things that I have taught to hundreds of clients is the phrase, because this was so common in my work that I have these little catchphrases that I came up with as a therapist because these are such bad human patterns I've noticed that just drag us down. Is if someone does not respect your no, they do not deserve your yes. So again, if someone does not respect your no, they do not deserve your yes. If you can't say no to somebody and they respect that, that is not a person for you. And unfortunately, we have many people that we can't say no to because we know it will lead to an explosion or that threat of violence or whatever. And that means we need to find new people. We need to find new community spaces. We need to find new friends. We need to take care of ourselves and put that self-care first because that is self-neglect. If we are surrounded by people who we can't say no to, that is major self-neglect. So exert the power of your no. And if you don't feel like you can, A, reality check that if it's safe to do so, right? So for me, when I first started learning to use the power of my no, I literally had to reality check it because I was with new people. I had completely lost all of my support systems, air quotes again, uh, that I thought were there for me because I exerted the power of my no, and they basically said, "Well, screw you." And so I was completely reorienting my entire social network. This was in the 20 teens, and I was getting my new social circle. I was getting my, new relationships, and I started to see, could I say no? And I could. It was very emotionally distressing to me. I burst into tears pretty much every time, but I needed to practice using my no and seeing that they were still safe people, that they weren't demanding of me. And that is, if you don't have that, let's talk. There are so many resources out there to help you with this because many of us feel trapped in those kinds of patterns. It's a very scary reality that 25% of us or more likely experience this sort of thing where we don't feel like we have the capacity to say no. So, that the next thing I want to share is to really find your caring communities where they normalize rest and vulnerability. So, Living Luna is a community. We have space on Discord. That's our number one space where we share space. And that is free to join. Discord is on your phone, it's on your computer. You can use it on the go. you are welcome to join us there. But look for local communities, look for groups that you can go be yourself in and where you can find yourself being honored. That is important for self care, right? So many of us stick around in communities where we are self neglecting because we feel like we'll be alone otherwise. So, really honor that for yourself. And then really get to know the signs of burnout. I have education on this, but there's all kinds of resources out there. Like, look at what burnout looks like and see how you're doing on that scale because it's for real. Burnout is way more of a commonality than it should be. It's normalized. It's often even glorified. I can't tell you how many of my clients have told me how many multiple burnouts they've been through in their life. And that shouldn't be the case. That shouldn't be the norm. Like, it really breaks my heart that that is what society thinks right now is the normal thing to do and be. It's not. So, I'm going to pull some cards. Like I said at the beginning here, there were 3 decks that wanted cards pulled. And I'm just going to talk through what comes up and how I feel like this relates to this topic of self love versus self neglect. One of the number one messages every single person out there needs to hear is that your self love, your self empowerment, your boundaries are the most important energy you can step into because that's going to give you the capacity to do what you're here to do. All right. Well, this is a fun and interesting message. The Atlanteans. So, I could tell a lot of stories about the Atlanteans. That's not so much what this live stream is about today. But if you would like to hear me talk about how the Atlanteans are playing out in our karma here on Earth right now, let me know because I'd be happy to do a special live on that at some point. But I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. But the message here is that there's acceleration happening in our collective right now. We're going to see massive technology acceleration, especially with everything that various governments are doing with AI and just the constant push for tech. So, in that, what we're being asked to do is to step into our own higher vibration, our own evolution to become better versions of ourselves so that we can make sure this expansion is being done in a self-loving and empowering way, that it is not continuing to play out the same patterns in our current collective of certain groups being neglected or the technology not being used for good but being used for profit for a few people. Like, none of that makes sense. There's so much abundance to go around, and so we're really being called into evolving into that. And then we have Rumi, mystical knowing, breaking boundaries, and having a personal experience with God. This is the same exact message. We need to really remember, I'm going back to that quote earlier, the kingdom of heaven is within you. Jesus literally trying to tell us that the divine is within us. And Rumi is here too. Your own personal experience with God is the most important one. No one else can tell you what that experience is meant to look like. I am for all religions and spiritualities that are empowering to people who empower them in love, genuine love for themselves and for their neighbor. And that's what a personal experience with God looks like. God is love. Anyone that I know that has a personal relationship with God, whatever that looks like, whether it's the universe, nature, a goddess, but like a personal relationship, it is loving when it's not predetermined by an organization that says what it looks like. So, this also has to do with breaking boundaries. And what that means is not breaking other people's boundaries. This is where I think the confusion around boundaries comes in is it's one of those words that has multiple meanings. In this case, breaking boundaries means breaking the barriers of limitation that exist both within our minds and within oppressive systems. We're being called to really step into our personal divinity, our personal expression and love. And unfortunately, love seems woke or something now. I don't know. I'm very confused. I'm curious on top of that, but we're being called to be more loving. And that is where the evolution comes from. And remember, love respects boundaries. Love respects our lines that say, no, please don't come in here. No, this is right for me. You can stay over there. Love does not have to equate to a relationship where we're even interacting. We can love at a distance, but love does not look like violence. It does not look like hate. It does not look like taking away people's belongings, rights, identities. Love does not look like harming other people physically. It does not look like making it harder for them to access services that give them dignity and health. That is not what love looks like. So I just want to remind you that. Oh, this is a tough card. So this card is despair. And this is, again, why in self-neglect and self-care, this card says, I need your divine intercession right now, O great spirit. Lift this darkness from my soul, free me from this burden, open me to your highest plan. May I be a peaceful vessel for your love. So this is literally what I was just talking about. So many of us are having our hearts broken wide open right now. And I see this again, I'm going to just say across the aisle, no matter who you are, where you're from, where you live, what political party you're in, and I'm talking literally global. There is so much suffering and despair right now. So many groups of people being harmed and subjugated, and so many other groups of people thinking that somehow if those people have rights or are acknowledged as a citizen or whatever, that something's going to be taken away from them. It's all this fear and just this chaos swirling vortex of fear, and everyone is feeling that on some level. So that I really think is this despair. And the self-care piece is like, how is this for the highest plan? How does this help all people? How do we step into more love and be more love? This is literally the message I speak every day is, can we be a more peaceful vessel of love? Can we hold an anchor in harmony for all human beings and the planet? How do we do this? So, all right, last deck. How do we do this? That's the question. How do we step into this next level of love and really come together? All right, we've got two that are stuck together here. I just said, how do we come together? This is so funny. Pleiadian activation. Coming together, harmony in the heavens, resolution. Thanks for just saying what I want. What's the other card here? Do you have a, okay. All right. It came together. They gave us an answer, but they were just really affirming here. This is the gateway of light activation, by the way. So the Pleiadian activation is saying, yes, this is exactly what we're here to do right now. Come together, harmonize in the heavens. Oh my gosh, like perfect synchronicity, because this quote of the kingdom of heaven is within you keeps coming up so powerfully for me. And resolution. We are meant to co-create heaven on earth. We're meant to be here coming together as one unified race, species, planet, to be able to live and flow with harmony and not create a bunch of karmic BS. We are so in the karmic BS swirl of fear and shame and disappointment and fear mongering and just so much of that right now, which is what the next card has to do with. And we can't come together while that is all taking place. So I asked, what does it take to come together and create the harmony? And the next card does answer that. And that is karmic board clearing. First of all, just look at all of these arms reaching up to receive energy and transmuting the energy down as well. So we are really being invited for an energetic collective clearing and to rewrite this collective story and to live in our truth. And that is why, for me, I've had so much fear recently as a LGBTQIA business owner who literally goes by the moniker the Queer Spirit Guide, because I believe that we are all different and we are all the same, that we each and every one of us are a unique being that is also one greater whole. And I have to keep standing in that power and living my truth to help other people live their truth and be their authentic selves. So even though I'm afraid, I'm standing in power with myself and my community so that we can rewrite this collective story. And that comes from not being in the same old karmic patterns. So we can't keep doing the hate swirl. We can't keep doing the us versus them. That means all of us. And this is something that's very hard when each and every human being at some point has felt the righteousness of their truth and their cause and their side. But as long as there are sides, we can't come together in harmony. We can't have peaceful resolution. And so it takes each and every one of us stepping into our self care, anchoring in the power of love as completely and utterly as we can so that we can radiate that out. And if we are not taking care of ourselves, it is very hard to be loving towards another human being. If we are not being compassionate towards ourselves, it is very hard to actually genuinely offer that to another human being because there's then this flavor of resentment that can bubble up beneath the shadow of why am I not being cared for in this same way? And that is part of this cycle of self neglect that just keeps spinning the wheels. So, all of this to say and come back to live your truth. And that is how you begin to step into your power. And remember that love does not have to control anyone else. Love can be at a distance. Love is compassionate. And we know that compassion has to start for the self first and then be flowed out to others. So if I know I can't be compassionate to another person, I need to stay away from them because it wouldn't be compassionate to me to go and be mean to them. That would do harm to me and them. Anytime we are doing harm to another person, it is also doing harm back to us because it's not compassionate to ourselves to be in the flow of being cruel and trying to control and exert our power over others. That's how karma is accrued. So I just want to take a moment to really drop into love here. I was standing with a loved one the other day who I have big boundaries with and I can't be around very frequently. And when I am around this loved one, it's very draining to me. And I just had to anchor in the energy of unconditional love, knowing I was there for a moment. And that was all I needed to do was be there for a moment in the unconditional love. And then I got to go right back to my boundary and not be in that space. And I wish more of us could anchor in this unconditional love in the way that we don't have to be anywhere we don't want to be. We don't have to be with anyone we don't want to be with. We don't have to hold space for people that we don't want to hold space for. But we don't have to be mean. We don't have to be cruel. We don't have to shun. We don't have to other. We can live and let live. And too many don't believe that. And that's what I really want the world to know and hear is that we can coexist. There is enough for everyone. And anyone that tells you otherwise has a motive for that. They have a motive for not wanting you to think that there's enough for you. And that's likely to keep it for themselves. So there is enough love. There is enough peace. There is enough light to go around. And the average person is loving and kind. And every person at their core is good, just traumatized and exerting power and control, which still isn't okay. Because as another one of my famous phrases says, compassion does not equal enabling. Enabling each other to do harm is not compassionate. And that's why we have to speak up and stand up and say, it's not okay to attack our brothers, our sisters, our siblings. It's not okay to do harm to one another. It's not okay. Love is the answer, and it's the hardest thing to anchor into. So please go out there and love yourself above all. And again, self love doesn't look like doing harm to others. It looks like you just taking care of yourself as an autonomous, sovereign human being, breathing, saying no, looking out at beautiful nature, moving your body, drinking water, eating good food, looking in the mirror and giving yourself some love, doing a doodle on a piece of paper, dancing in your kitchen. There's so many ways to do self love that don't cost extra money, that you don't have to go outside and be around other people for, that you can do for yourself. So tune into that. What can you do for yourself? How do you anchor in more self-love so that you can be more of a force of love out in the world? I love you unconditionally, and I'm here to support you. So please let me know if I can support in any way. Safrianna.com is the place to go. You can book a 15-minute call with me just to have a conversation on what all I do. But know that my free moon ceremonies are here for you to have those moments to tune into. And I will continue to go live as frequently as I can, uh, ideally once a week, to tune in with you all and just share some space. So I love you. I believe you. I see you. And you're not in this alone. All right. Until next time, I'm Safriana Luna, the Queer Spirit Guide. Bye for now.